Kia ora, my name is Kris Wehipeihana. I'm the Tumawaki of Te Rauhiranga o Aotearoa, the Library and Information Association of New Zealand, Aotearoa, and my webinar today is on VALA, VALA 2016. I am recording in the beautiful Lower Hutt Taita Library, where I am at Recreate, the Public Libraries of New Zealand strategic meeting for 2016. We've done one morning and everyone else is about to go in, so hopefully the noise level will go down because I will be too busy listening to our next speaker, who I'm really interested in hearing as well. So far it's been excellent. Some really interesting ideas have come through, which is the same as with VALA, surprisingly. I'm going to read a little thing about it, and hopefully I'll answer any of your questions that you have. So, VALA, which is a tagline of Libraries, Technology and the Future Incorporated, is an independent Australian-based not-for-profit organisation that aims to promote the use and understanding of information technology within libraries and the broader information sector. They've been around for 30 years, actually for longer than 30 years. They turned 30 in 2008. And they present the largest fully peer-reviewed library technology conference in Australia. It's held every 2 years in Melbourne, and it's recognised as a premier library and information technology conference within the region. The conference has delegates and suppliers, exhibitors from Australia, New Zealand, Asia and beyond. And that was certainly reflected in the conference that I went to this year as well, early February. Around Lunar New Year time, which was amazing to be part of Melbourne at that time, as well as having some of the performers come into the exhibition hall. Well done, organisers. We had the 18th conference, so this is the 18th conference in 2016. There are over 1,300 participants. It's 3 days long, and a difference with to the LIANZA conference is that there are peer-reviewed papers. There are roundtables, and this year the content was on content, as in scholarly publishing, professional development, and discovery, kind of discovery layers. They also have 4 types of participatory workshop things. There's a L-plates, which is for beginners to get a sense of what it might be like to play with this particular type of software. There's P-plates, which is kind of the next level up from beginners. There's a boot camp, which is a hands-on focused session, and workshops, which is participatory discussion and feedback. And this year they also had green carpet interviews with Corin Hames, immediate past president of LIANZA. So he interviewed a variety of attendees, of speakers, of exhibitors, so everyone who was there to make the conference what it was. So there are already some differences to the LIANZA conference. They do it in the same location, so everyone has a familiarity with the building. I certainly got that as a first-time participant. I was busy looking for where everything was, but the people who were there for the second or third or fourth or fifth time very definitely knew what they were doing. They knew the spaces that they needed to go to. They also knew the vendors and the exhibitors. So a friend of mine is an exhibitor, and he says that he often sees the same people there year after year, which means that you get consistency, which is an amazing thing. We get the same thing with LIANZA as well. I think it helps to be in a specific setting continually, although I wouldn't want that for New Zealand's conference. VALA is focused on technology and how it can be used for library services, so it also means that it can get quite technical in places. So where in some of the LIANZA papers people would be talking about technology as a tool, in some of the VALA sessions they would be talking about how to use the tool that will then enable you to do the thing. But I noticed that it felt like there was a really great mix of the 2 types of things. It was all focused on technology. Some of it was focused on the tool that you could use to do the thing. Some of it was focused on doing the thing and then using the tool to enable to do it, in order to do it. So it wasn't particularly technical if you didn't go to those sessions. I didn't go to those sessions. And they also have peer-reviewed papers. So one thing I hadn't realised before I went, because don't know what I was expecting, was that their papers, their presentations are often a trailer for the paper. So it took me a little while to get used to that. They would talk about something and then they would say, "Oh, see my paper." And they would do a very high level kind of overview of it, almost like they were giving you a summary without going into the detail of some of the things. That was certainly prevalent in the main hall, as we'd expect. These are kind of keynote speakers. These are people who have peer-reviewed papers who are going to just kind of talk about what they had. In the breakout sessions, it was much more about, this is the type of thing that we were doing, and here are some of the detail about it as well. And it was an interesting mix. And once I got my head around the fact that it was trailers for papers, I got really excited, knowing that I could then go back further, that I wouldn't have to take notes. VALA has papers available, plus the video of the people speaking, plus the slides available almost immediately after the conference. I don't know what the time frame is, but it felt really fast to me. And it meant that I could go back in straight away. I didn't have to take notes apart from tweeting about the things that really excited me. But I could focus fully on what the person was saying, the presenter was saying. So even though VALA is about libraries, technology in the future, there were some things that came up, as always. And it was really kick-started by David Lankes, who was here for the LIANZA conference last year. He did a slightly different, I didn't see his one last year. What I've heard is that he did a slightly different one for VALA, that he certainly pushed more of the aspect of action and doing something and being part of your community and participation. And that theme of pulling for librarians to be active and doing things in their community, that the idea that libraries and librarians can make a difference for the community well-being, either by being active in their library or in their community, is a theme that was throughout the conference. There was a lot about the narratives that libraries tell about themselves, about their users, about their communities, the narratives that the communities tell about them, or the libraries that they used to have, or the fact that someone would come in and say, "Oh, I haven't been in the library for X amount of years because of this thing that happened to me," or "I've always loved libraries, libraries have been my safe place," etc., etc., etc. So there was something about challenging our own personal library nostalgia, is what we called it, which I thought was an amazing thing. We talk about challenging stereotypes a lot, which is kind of a nostalgia for a particular type of thing which might not necessarily be true. It talked about challenging yourself, which included speaking up and advocacy, which was a big part of was one of the things that came through as well. To talk about the achievements that your library has made, or that you have made, or that you are making for your community. Working with the community, not at the community. To move away from the idea that good service means being invisible. There was a fantastic tweet by someone which was something about the self-effacing narrative that librarians use, that if it's invisible, you must be doing a good job because you can't see all the work. So people don't know that we spend thousands of dollars on databases for things. They go, "Oh, well, yeah, we don't need to do this because it's all on Google." It's not all on Google. And unless we start talking about the fact that we're spending thousands of dollars on something, or thousands of people hours, we're spending thousands of people hours on something in order that the community can access it, no one's going to know. All they're going to see is the seamless interface. So there was a little thing in there about friction being a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. If it's frustrating to do something, well, that doesn't mean it's not working, it doesn't mean it's bad, it just means that the lines aren't invisible. That's not bad. So move away from the idea that good service means being invisible, change or enhance the narrative that your work is good for other people too. So it's not just good for you, it's not just good for your library users, but it's good for the community that you serve. VALA is quite, to a degree, academic. Lots of academic libraries and people working in institutions that provide education for people ranging from private training institutions through to universities, through TAFEs, I think they call them, polytechs, etc. Not so many public libraries that I can remember. not quite sure why that is, just something that I noticed. So this was the first time for me. It was also the first time that LIANZA took a stand over to VALA, and it was a genius idea. Thank you for inviting us, VALA team. Leslie Ryle, Hugh, thank you. Why? And why did we go? We got asked this a lot. It was fantastic to be able to say to them, well, we're here because we've got an MOU with VALA, so we have a memorandum of understanding with them. We're fairly close together in terms of geography. We want to work more closely together with them and with you. Also, there are a lot of New Zealanders working in Australia and a lot of Australians working in New Zealand. So the number of people who came to visit the stand, the LIANZA stand in Melbourne, and said, oh, it's really nice to be able to reconnect with all my New Zealand colleagues. So there was a little bit of networking going on as well. And also people who were interested, who currently living in Australia, but maybe their partner was thinking of moving to New Zealand, or they were thinking of moving to New Zealand, and being able to ask us, well, what's it like over there? Oh, tell us about the professional registration scheme. What does that do? Oh, what's the job market like over there? What are their conditions? What do they have to do? We also caught up with a bunch of librarians working in New Zealand who hadn't had time to come to the LIANZA stand at the LIANZA conference. We could then come up and talk to Inez, who was outstanding. Feedback I've received is that she should get a raise, or get paid double, because she did an outstanding job on the stand, and she was very, very welcoming to everyone who came up. She was very open. She knew a lot about what LIANZA was doing. She was a really great advocate for us. She also wandered around the exhibitors and had a chat to them as well. So thank you, Inez, for all your hard work. So people who hadn't managed to meet Inez at the LIANZA conference could meet her at VALA, which seems counterintuitive. It's a long way to go to send two people over. Both of us would have been after the stand. I think it was worth the money that went over because of the relationships that we continued or made or met. We also managed to connect with people who, a couple of our fellows, Dr. Ross Harvey, we have a great photo on Twitter, on the LIANZA office Twitter stream of me and him. He named Library Life. He was a fellow, LIANZA fellow, and had moved to Australia and was now retired, but was still keeping his hand in library work. So there was something about collegiality and networking and giving people the opportunity and a place to meet. So I would go back there at the breaks, and there would always be people at the stand. Sometimes there were people at the stand between the breaks as well. We took Libraries Aotearoa merchandise over, t-shirts and bags, and the handouts that we have, and they went down really well. We also had badges, which is a great way to get people to come in and talk to us. It was fantastic to meet everyone, and it meant I took part in the professional development roundtable, and as with any panel discussion, there are 5 or 6 of us, I think, plus a moderator. As with any panel discussion, you get an hour in and you think you're just starting to get to the really interesting parts, and that's where I got to as well. It was good to be able to say to people, oh, come to the LIANZA stand and talk to me if you have any questions about any of this. I'll be there and we can have a chat about stuff. So it was a privilege to be on that panel with the people who are around, who were also on it. We had a recruiter, someone who worked in education, someone who was a new grad, president of the New Zealand Library Association, someone who'd been a manager or who was a manager, and we got to talk about all aspects of professional development, kind of from the very beginning. Once you have finished your qualification, how do you get a job in libraries, networking, through to if you have staff who have been there for a long time, how do you get them interested in professional development? And for me, I really harked back to the thing that Justin was talking about at the LIANZA conference last year, where he said, I asked my staff what they wanted to do and what they thought that they were best at, and then I made sure that I could, if it fitted within what the library wanted to do, I made sure that they could do that and that I could help them do that to the best of their ability. I talked about diversity. in libraries, and the fact that diversity in libraries, recruitment is all very well. If you talk about being diverse in libraries, great to get people in, but then how do you make sure that you can make them, create an environment that lets them succeed? So that's inclusion. And if you look at the LIANZA president's Twitter stream, I've been linking a lot of articles about that recently, because I think it's a highlight for us, and especially after this morning with Dr. Jackson, talking about the changing demographics and how important it is for us to acknowledge that our population is static and or declining, or is going to be declining, that we are all getting older, and that the makeup of the cohorts is going to be different as well, that we're going to need diversity in our workforce. But if we're going to get diversity in our workforce, then how are we going to make it so that people can succeed? A shout out to the VALA committee, because it felt like they were pushing us to think differently and to do different things. So not only what we were doing, but the way that we were doing it, how we were doing it. So they had a couple of keynote speakers who talked about asking, what if we did this thing? What if we did that other thing? What's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? We played this marvelous game, marvelous improv game called Yes and. Basically, you say a statement and the other person says yes and blah 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 blah. And just between you and me, it was really interesting to see how many people failed to play the game. Someone would say a statement and they go, but, oh wait, yes, but. It's like, that's not how the game was played. Which I guess is a good thing, because they were breaking the rules. But also, yes and they could have played it the way that everyone else was playing it, to make it consistent for us. Some more highlights for me were one about presentation about digital inclusion, and how easy it is for those of us who are a little bit more technically savvy, although sometimes it doesn't feel like I am at all, it's easy for us to forget what it's like to be a newbie, to be faced with a computer that is doing things and you don't know how to stop it, or something that will not let you in even though it let you in the day before and now you can't figure out why. People who are tech savvy can let that go. We can go, okay, that was a mistake, it was really frustrating, but okay, now it's done. And we move on. Whereas someone who doesn't have a lot of digital confidence can get that really knocked out of them. And so they get stuck with that. So there are a couple of programs that are happening in Australia at the moment about digital inclusion. And I recommend that you have a look at the VALA proceedings, which have all of the lists of things on it. They are locked to VALA members and all people who went to the conference. But if there's something that you're particularly interested in, there may be links within the description of their presentation that you could then go off to. A lot of these places have their own websites, or we might be able to work out a deal because we have a memorandum of understanding. Or we could get the person over for the LIANZA conference next year. Another thing about learning and how it takes time and it's messy, and it's because change is like that. It takes time and it's messy. So an acknowledgement both from the participants who were learning and from the people managers who have participants who are learning, that there will need to be allowances made for that. Yes, it takes time, so where's the time going to come from? Yes, it's going to be messy because while the learners are trying to incorporate that information into their current way of thinking, they still also have to do the stuff that they've already been doing, and sometimes there can be trouble with that. We talked about in the professional development roundtable as well, we talked about, are we a good role model? Do we do what we say others should? Are we still learning? Are we going to conference just to go to conference, or are we going to conference to explore opportunities? What do we do with the information when it comes back? Lots of really interesting things. I'm out in the public space and someone is just looking at me.
Oh, really?
And now it's trying to steal my notes. And a balance of library skills with other skills. So there's a library philosophy underpinning what we can do, but what else might we need to be able to do, or what other skills might we need to have? These are all questions that have come up before, I think. Certainly they came up in the Future of Libraries Strategic Day that we had, which is why one of the workforces that has come out of it is the Workforce Development Group, which has been led by Toroka Whakahau, which is enormously exciting to me. And they're going to be looking at some of those questions about what skills do we need, what skills might we need. Should we expect someone to have them straight away? Maybe, not necessarily. And thinking about building a new culture and new ways of working. So robust change methodology and defined processes and new skills and behaviour. How does that work? A couple of quotes from people, from Hugh Rundle, who's the current VALA chair. Libraries like to talk about being a trusted profession, but to be truly information literate is not to trust anybody. So some of the things that were really interesting to me were guidelines for social media and organisations. I went to a couple of presentations about that, looking at slightly different things. One was a whole survey of the streams that they used and what they were using them for, and another one was not only social media but also all of the learning spaces that they had, and how the guidelines for use of those things or for creation of those things can often be the same or broadly the same for each organisation, but the nuances matter. So once again it comes back to context matters. What you do matters in the context of what you're doing, where you're doing it, and who you're doing it with, etc. Talked about library nostalgia, which I talked about before. Papers are a mix of case studies and more technical aspects of things. Two things that really excited me. One was a discovery wall, which was basically a giant video screen that raised the profile of the academic and scholarly research that was done by the Institute and by the students within the Institute, and the resource, and highlighted the resources in the library, which I thought was an amazing thing. That a woman who did the presentation talked about some of the technical aspects of the video wall, and then talked about some of the more social aspects of it, and how it was difficult to stick to that initial idea of what they wanted because their community wanted something else, which of course is a great thing because then they could move to accommodate that as well. And the final thing, the final highlight for me, and I got quite emotional about this at the time, which surprised me, surprised them, was the Living Archive of Aboriginal Languages. So a university whose name I've forgotten has, I'll put a link up on Twitter, has worked with their researchers to digitise bilingual resources that were made during a period when the government was funding bilingual schools in Northern Territory. They've digitised it, they have put it into a discovery layer so that people can go to a map. You don't have to search by, well, you can search by particular language, or you can search by place, but if you don't know quite how to spell it, you're not entirely sure of which place it is, because sometimes the languages are very close together, you can search by map, which was amazing. The researchers are working very, very closely with the community to make sure that the procedures and the processes that they go through and the way that they hold the information for people is culturally safe. So the thing that I got excited about there was that it was an academic institution working on a big scale with Indigenous Australians to digitise material that is important to them, to make sure that it was also locally appropriate, so not only kind of generally appropriate but specific to the community that they had got the resources from, and also making sure that it was hitting the ISO standards for languages and high standards of cataloguing, etc., etc., etc. Sorry, that was my, you know what I mean, library stuff face. So it was the combination of very local as well as very global, and working together with the community who they are still in contact with. So they haven't done it and then walked away. They're still in contact with them to make sure that the information is being used and is available to those communities in a particular way. And some feedback that they've got that they shared about the archive was amazing. So students who were in a school who had never really talked in class before, their teacher used the resources with them, and then suddenly they were going, oh yeah, that's like this story, miss, and blah 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 blah, etc etc. So not only is it preserving the language, which is something that came up at the LIANZA conference last year as well, about the importance of preserving language and using language, making resources available that were made by the communities to the communities, as well as on a global scale. It was really, really exciting. And then a little bit later I talked to the Wikimedia guys who were thinking, and it was a guy, who were thinking of doing a similar project in Western Australia, which would also be amazing, working with the community, using the skills that they have in order to help the community keep their language alive and keep it going. So it was challenging and inspiring and affirming to go to VALA in 2016, to know that some of the challenges that they're facing are, or the challenges that they're facing are similar to ours, but as with the social media guidelines, the nuances are slightly different. Our context is different, their context is different. And we can work together on broad brushstrokes, on broad library philosophy, but then in the specifics we then have to go, we can share the way that we're doing the things, but the specifics of what we're doing need to change from community to community. If we get a registration again that is up for competition, I urge you to put your hand up for it. The experience of going to a different conference in a different country with a different way of assessing papers was excellent in terms of what I learnt about where New Zealand sits in the global scale and what we are doing. So again, thank you to Inez, thank you to LIANZA for sending me, thank you to Inez for just being amazing on the stand. You were really great. Thank you to Hugh and to Leslie, who are part of the VALA exec this year. Ka kite, everyone. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.